No, he finished with. Because Milo would have fixed it all. That was her. He pointed towards the window, in the direction of the generator building. And it was beginning to destroy him, the mystery that George Paget Thompson had laid on him. Alive, but no one knew where. There was a nonsense, if ever he'd heard one. So, he concluded, as his staff still stared at him, we will fill every candle holder, candelabra, jam jar, everything we have and fill 'em with Daisy's candles. Andy and I will feed the boiler, for the gas lights in the hall. And Flora, you will make sandwiches and finger food, for they don't look like they are ready for bed yet, and Coco. Aye, and for us all, Thomas added, gripping the back of his carver chair. Let us sit around this table and think about what today's news has brought to us. And then he noticed Milo's boy standing with them, still in his livery. Ernst, you're with me, he told him, and he gave Thomas a sharp nod of agreement. When they had all left the kitchen, Thomas turned away from Downton's cook and put his hand to his head, looking at the treacherous weather. None of us meant, Daisy began. Thomas turned to her. I know it is. A good thing she's in your minds and your hearts. He glanced at Ernst. She was loved here, lad, he added, then took up the keys from the table. Come on, he added, glancing to Larry, who reappeared again. Let's make Downton look like it did when I was your age. 88,888,888. It was early morning when Thomas Barrow sat by the dying embers of his office fire, a small glass of whiskey and water in it, thinking a little of Prue, and his fearsome, fiery distillates. Ernst was asleep, and the rest of the staff had gone to bed, the guests and the family not making it much later than midnight, given the news the day had brought. Outside, the rain beat an insistent tattoo against the window, and then a knock came, and Tom Branson's face appeared at the door. Mr. Branson? Thomas made to get to his feet, but Tom Branson waved a hand, opening the door a little wider and stepping inside. Mr. Barrow, Tom said. Thomas, and Thomas watched as Branson pulled a chair opposite to him, before closing the door and then sitting on the chair. It was against protocol. He surely knew that. As the exiled Lord of Enniscorthy, he ought to, at least. No one, not even the Lord of the house, could come uninvited into the butler's room, or the housekeeper's sitting room. But here, now, it didn't seem to matter, that bomb, and the weather dampening everyone's spirits, the electricity going out, which hadn't been mended, and, despite what Daisy showed him in the pantry, not enough for the house guests to keep going a second day without someone visiting the shops, or for the said house guests to be ex-house guests. I know we have had our differences, and God knows how sorry I am for what I did to her, too. I know, Thomas told him, glancing from his whiskey to Tom. And I thought I was over her now, that she was part of my past, all of our pasts, when I had the telegram that she was dead. And now, her son turns up, and her son, the tall lad. Branson looked towards the door, and then back to Thomas. But, perhaps when I know what is happening with him, I'll tell you more, Thomas told him. Ernst, he added, anticipating Tom Branson's question. I'll talk to him tomorrow, tell him that you weren't angry with him. No, Branson told him, I can do that. Ernst, he added, like her brother? Ernest, confirmed Thomas. And here was the next part. She gave birth in Germany, Branson, and the boy grew up there. He is, rightly, Ernest. Branson said nothing for a moment, just sat there, considering what Thomas had told him. To ease the silence, Thomas got up and reached for a second tumbler, pouring a not ungenerous amount into it. Slaintymouth, Tom said. Health, he added. Thomas nodded, raising his glass. I have looked into adopting him, Thomas added. He has his birth certificate, with me Lucina's name on. He even has her wedding ring. The last few words came out as a sigh. Adoption? Considering his mother's death, Branson prompted. Thomas gave a nod. It was easier that way. And, then he thought, he supposed it wouldn't hurt telling Branson. God knew, he needed to tell someone. Except, I have had two reports, telling me the same thing, Thomas continued. That Milo is alive. Then, God is merciful, Tom told Thomas, and raised the whiskey again. Really? Thomas asked, tears now in his eyes, "because she is in the hands of some authority or other. Her work, Branson, was specialized. It was to do with a nuclear bomb, perhaps even that nuclear bomb dropped on Japan." He shook his head, digitedly. "If she is alive, she is being held somewhere, and I just feel so wretched that I can do nothing for her." "But, you can. You really can," Branson exclaimed, bright of tone, a glint in his eye. "Look, I am sorry I was rough with the boy. I left Lucy and Brendan in France so I could look in on the business, with no Henry here. Back. I was trying to make light of it, but I really did not expect to find Sibby in the hands of a tall, blonde boy. I really did not." "And, how old were you when you and Lady Sybil eloped?" Thomas asked, knowing the answer. As if it was some bizarre drinking game, Tom Branson raised his glass again and took another drink. "Tell me about the business," Thomas asked, and Tom Branson did. The words acting on Thomas's mind like a sedative as the Irishman spoke about exports to America, and imported parts, smaller British cars, and new ones due to be arriving with already filled order books. And then Thomas reached to his pocket, feeling for the keys. Flora could take the ashes out in the morning, and he would lock the door. But his fingers caught on a letter, and he pulled it out as Branson continued to talk about horsepower and carburetors. It was one of Milo's. In the candlelight, he glanced at the letters, and then across to Tom Branson. "There is something you could do," Thomas said, when Branson had finished, and had apologized for what he had done to Milo. "I was given all of her letters, ones that never made it to me in the last 20 years, ones that were held up, shall we say, by forces unknown. And if he ever met this man Lindman, Thomas might well find time and a quiet corner to find out the answers to several questions that he still had unanswered." There was no answer for a moment, but Tom Branson was indeed reading it. At length, he looked back up to Thomas, and he noticed the man swallow, uncertainly. "You asked me to tell you, Thomas," Branson said. Thomas nodded, unable to find the word yes to reply with. And Tom Branson, with the rain still hammering down, and candles flickering around him, told Thomas about her confession to Prue, in 1943, when the SS had arrested her. "She says she did nothing that would betray the Reich," Tom told him, not daring to look up, and that her work was being done according to the lead of Professor Heisenberg. And he went on to say that she did not believe she deserved the punishment she had received, and on the life of her son, she swore that all work was done for Germany. On the life of her son. That was what then tipped Thomas over the edge. He crinkled his good right hand and plunged it towards his eyes, rubbing at the tears. She had been taken, she had been interrogated, punished, tortured. As Tom Branson read on, hesitating on one or two of the more difficult words to say aloud, Thomas Barrow unashamedly wept. Miss Ashby. Did all of this. Thomas realized Tom Branson had finished speaking, and waved his hand towards the letter. It would appear so, would it not? And then, when Tom Branson relaxed his hand, Thomas snatched the letter and thrust it into the fire. Branson sat next to Thomas for many more minutes, though only whiskey passed between them. Then, suddenly, Thomas got to his feet. "He's Milo's son all right," he told Branson, pacing about his office. "Not 13 and he's outstripped everyone in mathematics. Mr. Hartree at Ripon Grammar has had to send for more material for him to keep him going. But he was brought up in Germany." Thomas looked at him, bristling at what might now be an attack on the boy. "Yes," Thomas replied, stiffly, "he arrived here all on his own, looking for her." "Then he is very brave," Tom Branson told him. "Look, I'm here, if you need any help, Mr. Barrow." "With anything." "Appreciated," Thomas told him, and watched as Tom Branson got to his feet. He extended a hand to Thomas, and Thomas shook it, meaning it. As Branson opened the door, someone else appeared at it. It was Andy, and he was blackened with oil and rag in his hand, shaking his head. He had been down to the cellar, and, from what was now clear, had not been able to fix the hot water, either. "Does the offer start now, Mr. Branson?" Thomas asked. "It can," Tom conceded, and turned to Andy. "What is it?" "The boiler," Mr. Branson. I want to see how much you think car engines are like hot water boilers, Thomas told him, then drained his whiskey, and clapped Tom Branson on the shoulder.